r/AskReddit. What is the kindest thing you've done or seen? My dad ran into an old high school friend he hadn't seen in years. He learned that the man had cancer, that he had no family except a son in college in another state, and that he was basically dealing with it all by himself. So my dad started taking him to his appointments and out to lunch. He even organized how to take his crazy number of prescriptions, since it was confusing to figure out when to take them, when they all had different times and requirements. There were about 18 of them, I think he said. Then, when his friend died, my dad helped his son do all of the end-of-life arrangements. My dad is my hero. He is such a giving person and I strive to be like him. As a cancer survivor, blessings to your dad. Your story made me tear up. When I was going through my second treatment in my early 30s, a coworker came by my place often, sometimes with groceries, but mostly just to sit with me and watch TV, even though I was terrible company as I nodded off from exhaustion. She knew I was facing this alone, and I'll never ever forget her kindness. She was younger than me, but what they call an old soul, and one of the nicest people I ever met. Edit. Thank you all for the supportive comments, and to the kind stranger who gave me gold. Wow. I'm overwhelmed, everyone. It's been many years since that last treatment, and I'm totally clear of the cancer after 2 decades of dealing with it. It's stolen much of my family, but I'll be damned if it gets me. I lost touch with Lisa after I moved out of state at the end of that year. Sadly, I'll never forget how helpful and how gracefully present she was during those months. Best advice I can give to fellow patients is to keep your eye on that day down the road when you'll feel better than today. It may be weeks or months, but it's the day we fight for. Best advice I have for friends and loved ones of patients is to just be there. Please don't disappear. That happened my first go around and it hurt so much to see friends in denial and not wanting to deal with what I was going through. Also, instead of saying, if there's anything I can do let me know, say here's what I can do, or tell me what I can do please. I'm here for you. It can be hard to ask for help, but it's easier to accept a specific offer. My best wishes to all going through this struggle, to those who have come out the other side, and to those of us who have lost loved ones. I was 16, driving over to my girlfriend's house on rainy Saturday afternoon. There was a man biking in front of me, and when he went to get onto the sidewalk, he completely ate crap. I pulled into the closest driveway and saw that his bike was mangled and his arm was bleeding. I threw his bike in my trunk, gave him my old sweatshirt for his bloody arm, and drove him home. When I dropped him off, he gave me his card. Turned out he was a dentist at a local research hospital. Well, fast forward to when I'm 19 and the same man took out my wisdom teeth for free as part of a research experiment. Not sure if there was actually an experiment that they needed wisdom teeth for, but just goes to show that good things happen to good people. You got cloned, bro. This reply got me dead. I was selling my bike when I was a teen for $30. Got a hit and set up a location. Ended up being greeted by 2 kids on a single bike, one on the pegs, and the kid with the bike bought his friend my bike so they could ride together. Now that is a bro right there. Love hearing stuff like this. Thanks for sharing. Wholesome 100. When I was enlisting into the army, my recruiter picked me up to go over some paperwork in his office, which was close to the downtown area of my city. On the way there we passed a homeless woman sitting on the side of the road. Without even a second thought he whipped the car around, pulled through a nearby drive-thru, bought a huge meal with a large cup of water, and raced back to where the woman was sitting. The look on her face when he pulled up and handed her the meal through the window was something I will never forget. He didn't have to do something like that, but he did it out of the kindness of his heart. He's one of the best leaders I know, and I try to emulate him in everything I do. Eater. Holy moly, this blew up overnight. Thanks for the awards, kind strangers. Solid recruiting technique. Plot twist. The homeless woman was an undercover army personnel, and it was set up from the start. An older gentleman tried to ship an envelope to his grandson from a shipping company I worked at. The way he acted and the things he said threw up too many red flags in my head. So, against company policy, I opened the envelope after he left, and inside of it was 5 figures in cash. I called the cops and told them to get in touch with the man and try to figure out what was going on. As it turns out, someone had called the older man and said his grandson was in the hospital, and if they didn't send the money he would get a surgery that was badly needed. The older man couldn't get in touch with the grandson by phone, so he panicked and sent the money to the address they provided. We were able to stop it from happening and get the money back to him. He said it was basically his life savings. The story kind of got big and the news ran a story on it, and apparently it's a scam that happens to a lot of older people. We started this kind of club to reach out to nursing homes and try and educate people about it, and a lot of people were not aware of anything like that happening. A lot of good came from me just being nosy. I was talking to some random guy in the bar, and he said he was having surgery the next day and didn't have someone to pick him up after. I ended up driving him there, sitting with him before he went back, calling his parents when he got out, sitting with him in recovery, picking up his post-op meds, driving him home, and making sure he was okay before I left. Never saw him again, and that's okay. Edit. AWW. Thanks guys. To answer a couple questions. Dude was just grabbing a bite to eat before his cute-off time. His girlfriend had just broken up and moved, and his backup fell through. Guy just needed a hand. Seemed like no big deal at the time. I worked at Starbucks. One morning around 6:30 a customer came in, and I asked how she was doing. "Oh, it's already crazy, and I haven't even started," she replied. To make her day go a little easier, I gave her coffee order for free. A few days later, I was having a terrible morning. 6:30 and already chaos. She came in, asked me how I was doing, and I said the above. A couple hours later, she came back with a gift bag for me. Inside was a nice bottle of wine. We'd both had bad mornings, and someone's small gesture had made the day just a little bit nicer. Today you, tomorrow me. When my wife gave birth to our firstborn, the woman she had shared a ward with while in the early stages of labor had a stillbirth. After giving birth, rather than spending time bonding with her newborn, my exhausted wife gave me our son and spent 3 hours comforting and consoling this woman. Something about the bond of mother seemed to connect them. The woman and her husband have since become close family friends and had 2 beautiful children after this. They still credit the support we, mostly my wife, gave them in the period of time after the stillbirth, especially in those 3 hours, with helping them get through their grief. The kindest act I've ever seen. Done by the kindest person I've ever met. Your wife is a keeper. You definitely should marry her. If you don't, I will. Sometimes when my sister is sleeping or napping I plug her phone into charge so when she wakes up it'll be 100%. Edit. OMG, I didn't expect all this kindness. Thank you and stay safe. This is my favorite. I'm gonna have to start doing this. I broke my foot while bouldering a week into my semester abroad. I had never been out of the country before, so I was absolutely panicking. A total stranger came right over after I fell, recorded important info for the paramedics, and spent the next 10 or so minutes while waiting for the ambulance asking me questions about my studies and my research. I mentioned I was a student. He asked such thoughtful questions and was so kind and able to calm me down, even though I was absolutely freaking out. I wish I could be as chill and amazing as this guy. I saw a neighbor boy practicing his jump shot into some tree branches in his front yard. I had a portable hoop in the back from when I moved in that was taking up space. So I walked over and offered him the hoop for free. I only lived there for the next year or 2, but it was almost non-stop basketball dribble next door after that. I saw him, his sister, parents, aunts, uncles, even a grandparent or 2 all take a couple shots at the hoop over time. It felt good to know his family got so much use out of it. Speaking of hoops, I lived for a while in a pretty expensive neighborhood with an apartment complex pretty close by. I had a hoop outside, and several of the kids from the complex asked if they could shoot hoops in my driveway. Neighbors got pissed, but I said sure. Even brought them snacks sometimes. They never gave me any trouble and they didn't have a hoop, so I didn't see any issues in just being kind to someone else. Ball is life, man. I grew up poor and I remember sometimes going over to a classmate's house who had a hoop. Him and his family always said I was welcome to use it whenever I was nearby. That was the whole reason I fell in love with basketball. Small gestures like that mean a whole lot to people who have very little. Something comes to mind that happened to me once. It was my first job in the field of conservation and my boss was a real hard ass, but secretly a kind man. I had a 6-month-old son and was a 20-year-old single mom. I had just found out some bad news and was really sinking financially. My son's dad was dipping in and out. I wasn't emotionally mature enough for a relationship at the time. I had too much on my plate, one thing after another. I was the only woman on a crew of 7 men, working to plant trees, fix USFS roads and restore habitats in the PNW for 10 hours a day. Too girly to relate to the guys, too manly for my girlfriends. Nobody understood. I felt hopeless. One day I cried on lunch break. It was all stacking up, and I was cracking under pressure. After work the next day, as the other crew members filtered out of the work trucks, my boss said to me, "Just wait for a second." I was irritated because I thought he was going to ream me for my work performance, which he frequently did, for everyone. Instead, he waited until everyone was gone, pulled out his wallet, and took a wad of cash out. He said, "I don't know how much is here, cause I just grabbed a handful. But I want you to take every dollar in my wallet and help get yourself out of that hole you're in." It's been almost a decade since then, and my life has been completely turned around. I'm deliriously happy now. That gruff, sour old Forrester made a big change in my life, and for much more than that moment, I'll always appreciate having the opportunity to know and work for him. I reached out to dozens of people my dad has known and told me stories about throughout the years. Cousins, relatives, cowhawkers, groomsmen, friends throughout his adult years, friends from childhood, and even from his recently deceased dad before he passed away. I asked them if they could share a memory or picture they had of him. I was overwhelmed by the responses. So many people wrote back, even people I had missed but had heard about it through the grapevine. It was so kind of those people to dig through their archives and spend the time to do that. I compiled them all into a box and gave it to him for his 60th birthday. My dad and the rest of our family all really enjoyed reading the letters and seeing long lost photographs.